Well, welcome everybody to another episode of the Uncommon Freedom Show. I've got a return guest today, my brother, Michael Tinter.
Different location,
But different locations, different. Yeah. Today we are recording from the Cherish 2. We are in a marina in the Bahamas. We just got back from an epic week-long trip. Fall break has become a tradition for us. Definitely my favorite spot on earth. How about you?
Oh, same. It's unbelievable. I mean, anything down here is great. And then the further out you get from people, it just gets better and better.
Yeah, it's amazing. So because we are in port, they're cleaning up the boat. So if you hear some background noise, that would be it. If you see a little sway, you might see that as well. But we're excited to be here. We wanted to record at sea and that they didn't quite happy. We were too busy having fun. But excited to knock this out before we hop on an airplane to head home to our respective homes.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, Mike, you're a successful business person. Or businessman. I'm not going to use that world of trash.
Both are true.
But we'll go with businessman. And we've talked a little bit about your business journey on the first episode, but you also recently reviewed my book, which I appreciate. And what we really want to do is just focus on some of the disciplines from the book. One which would be master yourself and master your wealth. What are some of the takeaways or the lessons that were in that resonated with you that you've seen play out in your life?
Well, I think so much of it was, it just resonated because it reminded me a lot of like the journey I went on. Mm-hmm. So if I were to write a book, I would find myself writing a similar chapter. I mean, quite frankly, so many of these principles it's not that they're unknown or new, no offense to the author.
Right.
It's that so few of us ever implement these or practice these practices. They've been documented, recorded, talked about for probably centuries, but as long as I've been alive. But it just took me until, call it age 30, mm-hmm. to start applying any of these principles. So where to even begin? I think at the end of the day, I think probably the most important lesson that I ever learned about this particular topic is just understanding the value of a dollar from the standpoint of it's really just a tool. And it's not anything more than a tool. It unleashes a lot of opportunity, but at the end of the day, money is just a tool. Don't fall in love with it, but utilize it like you would any of the tool you have in your toolbox.
Mm-hmm. So
that's how I would probably summarize, like just reframing, like how I look at money. It's just a tool that you can use.
Yeah, I do. Dave Ramsey says money is good for three things: spending, saving, and giving away.
Right.
One of the things that Beck and I have realized, and we experienced this growing up, having, especially once our parents received a significant inheritance, our parents did what they could to give us experiences. But I think one of the best tools or the best uses of money is experience. Obviously, this week is an example of that. And, our parents scrapped together, our dad's known for, scrapping together a few $100 to buy us a mud bug or a mini bike.
Mopeds, dirt bikes.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Those were experiences. They weren't as much stuff or things as it really was the experience of getting to have fun together as a family. And when our parents received a nice inheritance, that allowed them to take us on that trip out west, trip to Puerto Rico, which really were trips that kind of opened my eyes up to, travel is a lot of fun and just the fun that we had as a family. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Money it can buy you experiences in a good way.
Sure. At that age, so I was, 5 years younger. I don't know that I actually associated inheritance or extra money with, there's this new opportunity. At that age, were you already connecting the dots?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the reason we're now doing this is because mom and dad had money they didn't have before.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we did the first trip. I think one of them was the summer before my senior year of high school. And the second one, I don't remember which went first.
I'm guessing they're 94, 95, or 95, 96.
Yeah, so it would have been the summer of 94, summer of 95. And so I was, 17, 18, maybe 19 at the time, and clearly understood that the cost, like I'm guessing because of how young we were, you probably were able thinking how much this trip cost.
Summer of 94 and 5, I would have been 11 and 12.
Yeah.
So Dylan's age.
Right.
I don't think I associated cost. I mean, I was just telling the story the other day. I think it was when we were still living in Lakewood, so it would have been 6 or 7. But I asked mom a question, like, I don't understand why we don't buy, like, more stuff if all you have to do is write one of those checks. Like, I didn't understand that there was money behind the check. You know, when you're a kid, you're still learning this stuff, and generally no one's teaching you. So you just have this, you know, false concept. And quite frankly, I guess there's a point where you realize, oh, it's because we don't have that much money, that you just wonder, like, why don't my parents buy nicer things or do these other things?
Right.
Like, I thought it was some self-assessed, like, yeah, we just don't do those things. Not like we don't have the money or the funds or the resources.
Realizing there's limitations. Correct. Because your bank account has a stopping point at some point.
Right.
And, you know, kudos to our parents. They did not live in that.
Oh,
So,
but the amount of people I know, you know, in our age range who are talking about, like, parents that they're having to take care of or going to have to take care of, man, oh man, is that a burden?
and not just physically, but financially.
Oh, yeah, I'm both and.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one is worse, to be honest with you, because if you have physical problems, that's one thing. But money doesn't, what did mom used to say, money's not as important as oxygen, but it's pretty damn close. And one of the two times I've ever heard her swear, like, if you don't have it,
Yeah.
you realize how much you need it or how few things you can do without it. Especially in this day and age, but I mean, healthcare or just taking care of somebody, I mean, it's very expensive, regardless of how you go about it.
And I think that's a great reminder for us as, you know, people who are in their 40s, middle age. You know, I was just thinking about this because we actually, on this trip, we were having a conversation with the kids about compound interest and how, you know, on average, an investment can double by every 10 years. Now, it's your investment, or it could double quicker than that. But I was just thinking about the fact that, you know, Beck and I were 46. I was like, we only have, you know, if we were to retire at 65, 6 years old, I was like, we're only going to double 2 more times in our life.
Right.
If we push that up till mid-70s, we're only going to double 3 times. I was like, wow, you know, we have done really well. But what occurred to me when I was thinking about where my kids are at and the fact that they're earning income through our business and all have fully funded annually Roth IRAs, it's like they have the power of tithe. And I've known this, but it was like a really sobering moment for me to realize, man, I'm only going to double 2 or 3 more times. My kids are going to double 5 or 6 more times in the course of their life, and the power of time with regards to those investments.
So I can't remember who it was, but they taught a lesson on understanding like how you're spending and how you make spending decisions, especially big ticket items. So if you take that same exercise every 10 years, your money doubles. Really, it's quicker. I think it's like every, what is the rule of 72? So you take the interest rate, you know, take 72 divided by the interest rate you can make, and that's how times or how often your money doubles up. But if you're to like take the kids, so the lesson taught to me was figure out how many times you can double up. So let's say it's 6 times. If you wait 10 years now, you're just dropping off the last double up. So in your last 10 years, if you go from $1 million to $2 million, you can't speed that up.
Right.
You lose that most powerful compound. The other visual, I think, you know, I learned this years ago, but if you take a piece of paper and fold it over on itself 50 times, you know how thick it is.
Is that the one where it goes all the way to the moon?
Yeah, it's all the way to the moon.
Yeah.
So one piece of printer paper, which it's hard to visualize, like how can you fold it over 50 times? You can't physically do it. But if you were to take it and, you know, cut it up into rough pieces that you put 2 together and then double that and put 4 together and kept going up.
Right.
That little printer paper thickness, which is 4 thousandths of an inch thick, would be from here to the moon and back. But you take out the last double up and it's only halfway there. So you're getting 2x the total impact just on saving that last fold. If you eliminate that, you have half at the end of, you know, your time stacking up. So if you apply that, we were talking about Austin. He bought a shirt for $60. He thinks it's cool. And I just told him, I said, do you think that shirt is worth, you know, whatever, $1,800?
Yeah.
He said, well, no. I said, well, you could think about the fact that it cost you $1,800 because instead of taking that money and investing it and letting it compound, you spent it on a shirt that you won't even have in 2 years. But that same dollar value from the shirt is invested, could have been worth $1,800.
Yeah.
I'm sure that went in one ear and out the other, maybe not.
Well, in the book, we talk about the fact that Warren Buffett, you know, billionaire, but a significant, like the majority of his wealth has been built since he was like 65 years old.
Sure.
And then going back to that paper doubling scenario, most of us have heard, would you rather have $1 million or a penny a day double for 30 days? And most of us have heard that. So when you think about the fact, like the power of that last doubling, like you go from it's like $5 million to $10 million on day 30, right? So day 29, you're roughly 4 or 5. Day 30, you're like 8 or 10. I don't remember exactly what the number is, but that's a great reminder of the power of getting that extra doubling. And so the lesson for us is, whether you're listening to this and you're 18 years old or you're 70, is if you are not maximizing your investment capacity. And, one of the reasons that we can justify a trip like this is we've already literally have invested for retirement everything that we legally can. We've maxed out our retirement opportunities, but, when it is a little bit sobering to think about what the long-term cost of an unbelievable trip like this is, but we're not going to hold credit card debt to do this, which I encourage everyone to never take a trip that you cannot afford to pay off at the time of the trip.
Oh, absolutely not.
And if you're already prioritized, if your only debt is your mortgage at most, and you prioritize retirement, then it's tight, because this is the other thing, is having the memories like this are certainly priceless.
How do you guys balance out? So, on one hand, you could get pulled into this trap of like save, and get hyper-focused on, well, we don't want to do these things and we're a little cheap just to be padding retirement. Because retirement accounts, that's one vehicle. But
right.
Truth be told, there's no cap on it,
right?
Like investment properties, real estate, or just investments outside of retirement accounts, which, is something I do. But how do you guys prioritize like the value of experience as compared to like the value of long-term savings and investing in your financial future?
That's a great question. The first thing is, like, one of our financial rocks is maximizing retirement. Then the second piece is making sure that we have 3 to 6 months. We live at 6 months or more of emergency savings. So, and we've been there for years, and we've actually built it up and padded it up since then. So once you have that buffer and you're maximizing retirement, it makes it a lot easier for us to justify trips. Also knowing, especially, social media, I think every single week Beck and I have a conversation about someone we know who is either our age or younger that is tragically, diagnosed with cancer or maybe dies. We know people that have dads of teenage kids that have literally been killed by a tree falling on them, a complete random freak accident. And so it's this balance of like, it's not a you only live once attitude, but it's also realizing, so many people, there's kind of both ends of the spectrum. They neglect the future for today and they really pay for it. But then there's the other half, they spend their entire life building wealth, and they spend the last part of their years able to spend all their wealth to get back their health. So they give up their health to build their wealth. And I would say the health is also quality relationships, especially with kids. And so for us, it's just realizing, one of the things is kind of identifying. We only have, with our oldest son, 2 summers. Actually, he's going into his, he's in his junior year, so we really have 1 summer left with him. Because by the time he graduates from high school, the ability for him to even go on a vacation with us is very small. We might have 1 more vacation with him after he graduates. And so just realize that we have a limited, not to say that we won't ever do it again, but he's not going to have complete time freedom as far as taking time off. And so it's just realizing if we don't prioritize the time with the kids now. And I think for me, epic experiences are so valuable because I significantly remember those 2 experiences we had with our parents. We took the summer vacation, Europe, drive down, see aunt, uncles, and cousins in Tennessee. We had fun, but the 2 trips that really stand out to me were when we went out west, went to the Grand Canyon in Lake Powell, and then when we went to that wedding, I don't even know who it was. It was a friend of mom's, but it was an excuse for the whole family to go to Puerto Rico.
It was somebody that we didn't really know all that well. I think, was it actually when David was living in Dayton? Fairborn was the guy?
The connection.
And so David was like living in a house with some guys. This guy was married a woman from Puerto Rico. The wedding was there. They invited a ton of people, and we got the invite.
Yeah. And once again, fortunately, finance has made it possible. Prior to that, wouldn't have happened. It just, there's no way we could have afforded it. So,
right. Yeah, I wondered if you were to take, as I asked you that question, like, do you have a, sliding chart, or how do you decide like how much you carve out for, spending or experience versus saving, investing? So I'm working with a guy right now as a business coach and a strategic life coach named George Daddis. Great guy. He's been there, done that. He's 72 years old. He grew a company from I won't say the exact numbers because maybe he doesn't tell everybody, but under $1 million to over $100 million.
Okay.
So he has the experience to speak to it. And when we first sat down to do a business coaching session, he first asked me about some personal goals. And I was like, time out, like business coaching. He said, well, he goes, so many people live a life that their business allows them to create. And he goes, and I think that's backwards. I think what's most important is that you understand, like, what's your purpose, what's your calling, what do you feel like you're supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And let's make certain that, one, your business is going to support that.
Yes.
And two, your business isn't going to pull you away from your personal life or prevent you from doing what you want to be doing. Your business should ultimately be the engine that allows you to like lean into and live out your personal goals.
Yes.
And that's been really challenging because it's not that it's put me in a bad place, but I've effectively, when measuring backwards, which is a Dan Sullivan principle from, I believe, The Gap in the Gain, he talks about you have to measure backwards. And when I first read this a year ago, I realized that I hadn't measured backwards in a long time. And so I was living a life that is great, no complaints, but I had hit the last really like long-term goal that I wanted to hit personally. I had surpassed it like 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't like revised personally what I wanted the business to be able to support. And so now I find myself in the process of like recasting a vision that's further out there. Because right now I don't personally have a vision that is beyond or stretched out past what the business can already support.
That's good. The concept of finish line versus, because when people cross the finish line, they stop running. And so whether it's health, finances, relationships, right? Like we see this happen in marriage all the time. Guys are notorious and they pursue the woman, they get married, and then they stop the pursuit.
Sure.
And it's this finish line mentality. With health, the diet mentality is, okay, I reached my goal weight, and so I go back to my old habits. Well, that's finish line, drop your pack. Party type mentality doesn't serve you. The key is to keep stretching yourself. And it takes a lot of discipline, but certainly in our coaching business, whether it's people from their health standpoint or the business standpoint, we see people set goals, and if they don't, it's just human nature. If you don't set a new goal for yourself, you're going to stop growing. And the reality is if you're not growing, you're shrinking.
That's right.
Or you're going backwards.
So the thought I was having as we're talking this out is I don't have an exact number that I set aside for experiences. I generally have a soft rule, which is I don't go on a vacation or a trip that costs me more than the business makes that week. So I go out of town, I don't want to be like, oh, it's going to take this week and next week.
Yes.
Or this week and the entire month and the next 2 months to pay for this.
That's good.
And so that's kind of been my cap. But I'm thinking about what George Status has been talking about. And this comes back to a principle. Well, you love Daniel Laughing's book.
Right.
Is it Thou Shalt Prosper?
Yep.
But there's this whole principle about resting that works whether you have a biblical outlook on life or not, which is if you rest one day a week. So I think what I'm going to do when I go home is I'm going to carve out what would it look like if I took 1/7 of like my take home and applied that to like rest, retreat, related things.
Yeah.
And just see how that pans out and then use the other 6/7 for all the other just, operational investing, living stuff, but truly just took 1/7 of it for like true rest and retreat and just see what that would look like. Something tells me, I tend to see that like God's design of things tends to show up working pretty well. And so if he told us to like chill and like rest 1 day a week, I bet that 1/7 approach to finances would probably be a pretty good story.
Yeah. And the challenge, I think one mistake families can make is thinking we're not, we're just going nose to the grindstone when we're at home. We can just take vacations and that'll make up for everything. And I don't think that's a wise approach to life and parenting. But what we have seen is that when you unplug, literally, like our kids' phones, they haven't had them for a week. There's virtual no cell service out here. The Wi-Fi is spotty, and it's just a natural unplug. And the quality time is so valuable that when you pile that on top of normal life and being intentional about investing when we can, that the return on investment is incredibly high. The memories you create, because I think shared memories are one of the things that bring closeness, and that's what epic trips can really create. So let's just go back to, I know in the early days of your business career, you were self-employed, not a business owner,
Right.
and you experienced some debt. So what are some of the lessons that you learned from that, and how would you help people not fall into that same trap?
Well, at the end of the day, it's a discipline and a decision. So one of the biggest traps I think entrepreneurs find themselves in early is somebody whispers this phrase into their ear that it takes money to make money. And then I use that to like justify, like put it something on a credit card. Well, I need, you got to spend money to make money. And it does take money to make money, but can we please put an asterisk down with a footnote that says, but it doesn't mean it has to take money you don't have
Yes.
to money.
Yes.
It might mean that you have to grow slower. It's going to take longer to scale up to where you want to be. But I think the most important thing would have been just some proper education and understanding of like basic finances and the decisions you make. So if I could go back in time, I just would have never put anything on a credit card to get started. My first business was truly just a solopreneur. Had employees, had subcontractors, but I could not go on a trip like this, regardless if I could afforded it, and the business continued to run and make money and operate smoothly back home. That didn't exist. I was just self-employed.
Yeah.
But the biggest trap I fell into was I didn't know my numbers. I didn't truly have it dialed in as to like what my gross profit margins were. So I didn't have control over the business. And most businesses don't fail from a lack of, revenue or a lack of business opportunity or talent or skill or ability. They fail because people don't know how to manage the financial side of the business.
Yeah.
And that's what I didn't know the first go.
And the reality is a home unit is essentially a business. And most families, couples, they really don't know how to manage the business of their family. That's where they struggle.
I get it. I was just golfing with my buddy Caleb last Friday, and he said he has his wife. He's the president of a good-sized company, and he and his wife, they have a business meeting every Friday morning, but it's the home business meeting. He's the president of his company. She's the president of the household, from one perspective. Like that's her primary purpose, is to make certain that her family household is good. And they have some mentors through their church. And he's like, they told us to start having the business meeting once a week. And she and I are on the same page because she's at home more than I am. And we have to prioritize the fact that we run the household just as meticulously as I run the business. And so we have that business meeting.
Yeah.
But it's the home business meeting.
Yeah.
The first time I'd heard that, thought it was a great idea.
It is a great idea. And I've also heard this saying, a lot of people spend more time planning their vacation than they do their life. And when you think about it, it's really true. And when you plan your life, you can spend a lot more time and money planning your vacations. But so many people, they are, accepting, as John Maxwell says, I love this quote, accepting the life they don't live instead of leading the life they want, which forces them to take vacations to get away from the life. And then they go back to, the misery of their day-to-day for 51 weeks until they could take another vacation. But if you were to just reverse things, and the challenge is it requires giving up some immediate gratification, but it's that short-term sacrifice that really leads to the long-term payoff. Let's shift gears real quick and just kind of talk about the stewardship principle. You and I have similar values, giving and things like that. I recently had a pretty cool example. You don't have to share specific numbers. It's one thing for me and Becca to talk about this on a regular basis, but I also love it when other people experience, the law of tithing and just the benefits that come. I guess let's first go back to when did you start to really implement it? And then, how have you grown through that? And you can share the recent pretty cool story you have.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the exact year. It's probably 13 years ago. That was a transitional period in my life. It was post-divorce. I don't even know if you know this whole story, but at one point I had the IRS drain my bank account.
I did not know that.
Yeah, IRS drained my bank account, went out to lunch, tried to put lunch on a debit card, got declined, pulled up my bank statement. I promise you never want to see this line item on your bank statement, but it just literally said IRS withdrawal, and the balance went to zero.
So you owe taxes?
I owed taxes. I didn't know that they only have to send notices to a last known address, and they were sending notices to an address that I didn't live at. And wow. Yeah. And it went back to some, post-divorce stuff. And they're like, well, we know how to get your attention, so we just drained the bank account.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Granted, a little bit of a head in the sand season, no doubt about it. So I probably could have been in the know. But long story short, they get my attention. And, it's one of those rock bottom situations. And so I was sitting in church and I was like, all right, Lord, I know what I haven't been doing. So here it is. And I believe Actually, I know where I was sitting. I think the amount of money I had in my bank account was ridiculously little, but it was something like, okay, well, I'll do this. And I literally tithed that night. It was something to the extent of like $2.16. Like I had 2160.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of low number. And so I was like, well, there's a story about this woman who, just she gives the little she has, but it's like, it's everything.
Yeah.
It's a small amount, but it's everything. And I forget, I think it was at that point I was liquidating out my old business. I had a couple of things that just weren't selling. I literally tithed. I believe it was a John McMillan concert that night at my church. I tithed $2.16. And then the next day, this piece of equipment I'd been trying to sell, sold for like 14 grand. So just like freed up, right? So I had all this cash flow issues as a result of a lot of things going on in that season of life. And so just instantly there was a moment. So since that day, I have never backed off. That story actually predates the IRS drain bank account. True story. You could ask my pastor, Andy Sikora. I had to email him and tell him, hey, there's a tithe check I wrote that's probably not going to clear because the IRS just drained my bank account.
Wow.
It happened on a Monday. I wrote the check. It dropped into the tithe box, and he sent me an email back. This is the first, and also, it's happened before where a tithe check has bounced, but no one's ever given me a heads up, just let me know. And miraculously, I don't know how this happened, but it actually went through. And then I managed to negotiate money back from the IRS, in this, hey, I'll deal with this, but you got to throw something back my way here. And they did. And ultimately, Dave Ramsey talks about getting the KGB off your back. That's when I really went into okay, time to clean up the finances. No and smoke. Holy smoke. You didn't want to talk about running at the speed of light. You do not want to be in bed with the IRS. That is not a friendly agency at all.
Wow. Yeah, that's a little scary how much power they have.
They got a ton of power, but I probably just head in the sand type of stuff. It's not like they came out of left field, nonetheless. So those are kind of the early on, okay, I'll never do this. The tithing principle, that'll forever be a part of what I do. That money is allocated first, and that's the end of it. It continues to show up, the principle of tithing, God giving it back to you, just continues to show up. And if sometimes it happens so often now, I sometimes miss kind of God throwing it back my way. But the story that you mentioned recently, I went to look at a house. I liked the house, $1,050,000 asking price on the home. And I didn't think it was worth $1,050,000. I was like, I would pay $950,000 for this house. There's some complications. I found out that the homeowner is a friend of a friend. And I was like, well, I really don't want to negotiate with a friend of a friend. This guy's a member of the golf club I just joined. So it just felt like it had the opportunity to get messy, and never know how somebody's going to react to an offer.
Yeah.
Right. Some people wouldn't be offended if you offer him, $200K under asking price. Other people, if you don't offer him asking price, then I'd be like, we know each other. Or we have mutual friends. How could you lowball me like this? And so I just decided, so we looked at the house on a Friday, and I just decided I wasn't going to do anything with the house. Wasn't going to put an offer in. So the next day, on Saturday, I'm golfing, and turns out the two of the guys I'm golfing with are friends with the owner of the home I looked at. And I told him I looked at the house, but I didn't really want to negotiate with the homeowner. And so that's just where it was at. On Sunday, I'm doing church. Actually, I was watching online, and I just felt God telling me, hey, cover this gap that the church has in the budget. We had some storm damage, some water backed up into the building. We had to remodel, and we were behind budget, close to just a little less than $50,000. Actually, it was $43,271. And I just felt the Lord say, just cover it. So I grabbed my computer, and I use National Christian Foundation. I pull it up, and I had them send a grant, or whatever it's called, to renew for the gap in the budget. The next day, I get a phone call from one of the guys I golfed with on Saturday, who's friends with the homeowner. He said, hey, the homeowner, John he wanted your cell phone number. He said he wants to offer you the house at a price that you won't turn down. And John, great guy, I've gotten to know him at this point, but he owns car dealerships. And so when a car guy is like, hey, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse, you're like, is he going to pay above asking? Where's this going? Is he offering you a free warranty? Some undercoating? What's going on? And so I was like, hey, yeah, that's fine. Give him my number. So John calls me, and he just starts talking about the house, all the maintenance and everything they've done to it. They built it. They're building a new house with the same builders, going on and on for 15 minutes. And I'm fully anticipating this token offer, $20,000.
Yeah.
Sorry, $1 million easy, I'll give it to him. He's like, look, Mike, I heard, you were asking, is there room on the property to put up a second garage or put a pool in the back? That stuff's all expensive. So if you want the house, you can have it for $900,000.
Wow.
And I was like, well, John, I don't make big decisions without thinking about it, praying about it, and sleeping on it. So let me call you tomorrow morning, and I'll give you my answer. And obviously, well, not obviously, but obviously it felt like it was from the Lord. So I called him the next day and accepted his offer to buy his house, which is a unorthodox way of buying a home. But it didn't hit me until like a few days later that I told my realtor I would be willing to pay $950, but I don't want to negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we had gone into it and started negotiating, I probably would have offered like $925.
Mm-hmm.
He would have probably been like, well, I can meet you halfway or something like that. I'd be paying or being asked to pay in the upper nines for the house. But if you look at the timeline of events, I just felt like uncomfortable. So I did nothing. Then God puts it in my heart like, hey, do this thing. Be obedient here. I'm obedient there. And then the next day, the homeowner calls me and says, I'll give you not just what your upper limit of paying for the house, I'll give you $50,000 off it. So within 24 hours of God saying, hey, do this, he gave 100% of that right back.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here telling the story like, hey, it comes with a 100% money back guarantee. You're never going to feel it missing because God will return it.
Right.
It's not like a coupon that you redeem necessarily.
Right.
Like that story prescribed, but it just goes to show you, and it's a good reminder for me that like God is faithful. He does always return it one way, shape, or form or another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the most recent example. It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, that is awesome. And, Beck and I, we just encourage people. We know that many people, they don't tithe. I know there's some debate is, tithe an Old Testament thing, is it a New Testament thing as far as it being at 10%. I'm fully convicted that a tithe is, I wouldn't feel comfortable tithing anything less than 10%. I read the stats on, Christian giving it's something like the average is about 2%.
Yeah.
And a few years ago when Beck and I actually made a shift from tithing on our personal gross to our business gross, it was just this realization of, I think God can bless whatever he wants, but what I think is God typically blesses what we give him, not what we don't give him. And so your example it's a great case study in that. And like you said, it's not a given. It's not a coupon. It's not a vending machine. Like, okay, put in your tithe, you're going to get it back and, a raise or something like that. But I think a lot of people, they don't experience those blessings because they just don't trust God with that 10%. I think that's kind of the starting point.
Well, and I think most people's mindset behind tithing is like cause and effect, right? Or correlation versus causation. So if they see somebody, their perception is, oh, they have the means to give. Of course they give. Look at how, wealthy or successful they are. And so if I'm ever like that, I'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a mindset trap. When the last time I gave for the first time, I gave $2.16.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I felt the Lord being like, hey, you need to be faithful here. I'll take care of it from there. So, like, if all you have is $21.60 in the bank, I'm not promising, it's not my promise to give.
Right.
But this isn't restaurant reviews. This isn't like, 5 stars would go again. This is, my experience has been like, God is faithful. I believe it's 10%, and that's what you should do. My advice or recommendation would be just go to the Bible, read it for yourself, and pray about it and do it.
Yep.
And if you have differing results, okay, I doubt you will.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of people, whether it's investing in themselves, investing in their relationships, marriage, or tithing, we have very short sight. When people think, okay, tithe one time, I'm going to sit back and wait for this, the harvest of this. And, I love the concept of being a farmer and the standpoint of you don't just plant one seed, you plant many. And you don't just plant the seed and walk away, you still have to tend it. And I think that is a mistake that people make is they're like, all right, I got $100, I'm going to tithe 10, let's see what happens. And it's like, if not to say they got low, but he probably won't. And that's a mistake. And it's also going back to the parable of the talents. It's like, right, when you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much. And most of us have not been faithful with the little. We're saying we're going to be faithful with a lot when we get there. But until then, I'm not going to tithe or whatever, the scenario might be. And that's the mistake that we make. So learning to be faithful in that little is key. So, Mike, it's been awesome. Been awesome chatting with you. Appreciate just all the great discussions we have about business and all the ins and outs. And of course, it's been amazing hanging out for a third time in the Bahamas. On the one hand, I wish that everyone had the capacity to do what we've done. I don't want the Bahamas to get too busy. So selfishly, people stay away, especially the first week of October.
I think we saw one other yacht at sea this year.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Literally, it was like the Bahamas was our playground. It was absolutely unbelievable. But man, folks, if you really harness, if you implement these disciplines, there's so much potential out there. And, life is great without money. It's just a lot better with it because the experiences specifically, like I'm not enjoying my investments right now, but what I do enjoy is the experiences I get to have with people that I love. So been great having you, folks. Thanks for listening. Super excited. We are now less than 1 month out from my book release date. I've already had, I've had a handful of people review it, and the feedback has been very positive. I've already had, some people, specifically one close friend of mine, just talk about how reading, and specifically the financial piece of the book, was really convicting and caused them to make some decision changes with regards to the finances. So I'm confident that if it's impacting some people before it's even released, it will have a positive impact in you. So looking forward to really getting the word out over the next few weeks. And you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening.
Hey friends, here's a quick reminder that if you're finding value in this show, would you do us a favor and subscribe, share with someone you think would benefit, and give us a 5-star rating. We make nothing from this show and invest a lot of time and money producing it. All we ask is that you help us get our message to more people.